Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I cannot wait to introduce our guest to you. But before I do, I want to let you know what you're watching. You're watching Truer MU. This wonderful channel is an exploration into my musical mind and my exploration of learning and writers, musicians, composers, just about anybody I find interesting I put on this show. There's also a regular feature called How to Write a Song in 30 Years, which you might enjoy. And you can find lots of other great stuff on here too. Go to YouTube and search for TruerMU, TruerMU.com, or you can go to my website at adamthelearningcoach.com or abetterpianoteacher.com. Many of you know that I'm a writer and have published a number of books. I've had one person in my life who's been more helpful than perhaps anyone else on the planet regarding my writing career, and his name is Ron Hull, and I want to tell you a little bit about him. Not only has he been a good friend to me in terms of supporting my work, he's brought me into a community that has helped me support my work, and he's been a good guide and role model for me in how to conduct myself as a writer. This is Ron Hull on our show. Ron Hull is a writer and educator who currently lives in Houston, Texas. He has worked as a quality assistance engineer, a college professor, and an author. His latest novel is called Starting Over, and it will be published by equuspublishing.com. That's E-Q-U-U-S publishing.com. Ron, welcome to our show.
It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here. You have led a fascinating life, and I think we'll only be able to get to just a little of it today, but I want to try to get to as much of it as we can. I want to start with all the places you've lived, Ron. You've lived in Wisconsin. You've lived in the Bay Area of California, you've lived in West Virginia, you've lived in Atlanta, and now you currently reside in Houston. What was your perception of these places before you lived there, and then how did living there change your perception of them?
Well, Wisconsin, uh, basically, I grew up there, so it was second nature. But I had a dream of the California coast, and I went there and found it to be a very warm place with lots going on. I arrived at the just before the summer of love, and I found myself in San Francisco more than studying for my master's degree in engineering. I was just loving living there. And then my alma mater called me back to Wisconsin. So I went back to Wisconsin. 2 years there, and I saw the handwriting on the wall. I have to get an education, a further education. So there was a doctoral program they called me. They had an assistantship in Morgantown, West Virginia. So I just got in my car, put everything in the car, and drove off. And when I was crossing at Wheeling, I heard this new song, Country Roads, was on the radio, and it welcomed me to West Virginia. And then I discovered when I saw cars off to the side of the road and pilot cars for trucks, how difficult it was even to drive to Morgantown in those days. And I ended up staying 7 years.
Wow.
And then uh, I lost the job because we wrote 73 proposals and only got five of them. Uh, Five of them funded, so I had to look for a job. And I was uh, offered a job in Atlanta after several other interviews at Atlanta University. So I went there, a predominantly Black university, and I really enjoyed my time there with those students, some really brilliant students in the MBA program there. And of course, they were having monetary problems, and they let me go after a couple of years. So then a friend of mine who graduated at WVU just before me in his doctorate, I was looking at the ads and I saw he was the vice president of administration at Texas Southern University. So I called him up and congratulated him. And he said, "You want to come and run the computer center?" I said, I don't think I can run a computer center. He said, "Well, how about my special assistant?" So I had a job lined up with Lockheed in Atlanta, but I pulled up stakes in Atlanta and went to Houston, where I've stayed. I stayed at the university for 30 years, retired in 2011.
Yeah. Well, so and you remain in Houston today as a retiree, correct?
Yes.
Living the life of an author.
I have I need this weather, even though the weather can be really bad here in Houston. I need this weather with my physical condition. And I don't see myself going anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, no offense to the West Virginia part of your story or the Atlanta part, but I have to hear more about the Summer of Love. It's very rare we have a guest on our show who was around for the Summer of Love. So, first of all, tell me more about you were in Wisconsin, I think, 24 years before you moved to San Francisco. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, first of all, what kept you in Wisconsin 24 years when most people tend to leave at 18? And what finally got you out of there?
Well, I wanted to be an architect, and the only architectural school in Wisconsin was Frank Lloyd Wright School, and I didn't have a single idea how to get in there. So my advisor said, "Well, go to University of Wisconsin Stout, or at that time it's called Stout State University. They have a program where you can go ahead with architectural drawing and all the things you like to do." So I went there, and it was a wonderful place to go to college. It was just small town. The students ruled, and I was there with my twin brother, and we the second year, first year we were in the dorm, the second year we're out, and it was going along really well until uh, I had to go have surgery on my junior year. And do you want me to explain all that?
Actually, I have a question later in the interview about your physical condition. You're
Okay.
welcome to talk about it now if you like, but I am going to approach it.
Okay, well, I'll wait till that. So I came back there after recuperating from my spinal surgery, came back to school, and I had top grades, and I was looking for a place to go to graduate school. And my advisor said, go to the University of Wisconsin. There's a great guy there in industrial engineering. So I went, and I was at University of Wisconsin, and I wrote 60 letters to schools. And in the spring of the year, I got a fellowship at Stanford.
Ah,
And that was the trigger. I always wanted to go to California, so I just told my advisor there, Dr. Jerry Nadler, I said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to go to California." He just hired a specialist in my field from Southern California to come to Wisconsin. So I was walking with them when we talked about it. He said, "You don't want to go there." And I said, "I sure do. I want to go." So I went.
yeah.
And
And you landed at the very best time to be there in the entire world.
yes, it was. When I was going to lunch, I'd come back. I was what you call a square student. I wore a jacket and ordinary clothes, and I didn't dress the hippie look. But I was really interested in the hippies and what they were doing. But I'd go to lunch and come by White Plaza, and at noon, David Harris was speaking to the audience there, telling them he was the student body president. Went on to marry Joan Baez and go to jail for being against the war. And then I went to San Francisco, like I said, every chance I got. Went to Chinatown and uh, to Broadway, North Beach, and I picked up 14-year-old hitchhikers, two of them, and took them to San Francisco. One went to a place called the I'm trying to think of it right now, but Fillmore Auditorium on Fillmore Street,
Yeah.
and I dropped her off there for to go to a concert. And then another one, I dropped off at Panhandle Park, and I parked my car there and just listened for a while. And the band playing may have been the Grateful Dead.
We'll never know.
When I left California to go back to Wisconsin, my mother said, "Oh, why'd you leave? We want to go visit you in California."
You have degrees in different aspects of technology, especially industrial technology. Will you explain what industrial technology is and what the appeal was to you?
Well, basically, it's improving industrial processes, and basically, it's people that worked in it. Like my twin brother, he was in it for the rest of his life. They were called efficiency experts, and blamed for putting people out of jobs like AI is doing today.
Yeah.
They would improve the lines and improve the way things were made, make them faster, better, and cheaper, and all of that. My brother introduced a lot of plastic into products to save money. So it was a double-edged sword, but I was interested in what was called human factors engineering, ergonomics, or whatever. It was the human interface with the machine. And that was my interest. And that's my degree in Stanford was actually biotechnology, which is a misnomer because now it's used for genetic studies and things like that. That's biotechnology. But in that day, it was a man-machine interface. I never worked for anyone, but I'm now getting involved in groups with that are working on uh, various devices to help disabled people, physical devices.
Yeah, yeah. Now, at the time you were doing this, you had no notion that you'd be reliant on machines like you are. I think it's just a coincidence in a way.
Well, I grabbed onto every technology I could find.
Yeah.
That's
Um, let's talk about your life as a writer. Now, I know from your bio that you were unhappy with your first short story in high school, and it took you a long time to write another. This is from a man who's written 1,500 poems and countless stories and even countlesser nonfiction works. I mean, you are a writer through and through. So why is fiction was fiction harder for you? And if it was, why? And why'd you quit for so long?
I just don't know. When I always felt that real life stories were interesting, and fiction was I was supposed to come up with a plot that somebody liked, and it was supposed to be something that was interesting to them, maybe outrageous, or something like that. But I always felt that the real life was sometimes stranger than anything you could come up with fiction. So that's what I focused on. And I started writing in 1971 when I was still in Wisconsin. I started writing a book called Tales of the Concrete Tales because it was about all the hitchhikers that I had carried with me. They're very, very interesting people. So uh, when I was writing it, and then I decided to go to West Virginia, and it was just written on paper, and I lost it somewhere, but I didn't forget the stories.
Do you want to tell us any of those stories?
Okay, let's go with the psychiatrist. I was all the way to Washington, I believe, and I was on my way back, decided to go along the coast. I was returning from uh, Washington back to San Francisco, and I was along the coast, and I saw this boy by the side of the road with a coat on, and it was a misty morning. He got in and he smelled of sheep dung. And about 5 miles down the road, he got out, and I was glad for that. And then I saw this old man by the side of the road. And I didn't really like to pick up old men, but he was dressed pretty well, so I pulled over. He came over and he opened the car door and came in and stuck his hand out and said, hello, I'm Oliver P. Henderson, child psychiatrist. And he got in the car with me. And then as we were going down the road, he said, would you like to stop for a snack? And we stopped at this little roadside store. And he bought some Fig Newtons for a snack. And we got back in the car and he handed me some Fig Newtons. He said, they're very nutritious cookie. I said, they're very good. We were going along and he said, oh, can you stop up ahead? There's a little cove that I like to visit. We pulled off, went down into the cove, and he knew every bit of fauna and flora there. He pointed everything out to me. It was all Greek to me, but it was wonderful to hear him talk about it. And that was a real secluded place. There was nobody there. We just came back to the car. And along the way, he told me what he had done. His son was in Canada, and he was there dodging the draft. And he had had their Volkswagen van, and he'd gotten an accident, and he was in jail. And so he had to go rescue him. And his Studebaker, the engine was out on the Studebaker, so he took the bus all the way to Canada. He got that business straightened out. Then he came down and got some rides, some of them not too good, but he decided to hitchhike rather than take the bus. He got some rides through Oregon, and he got on the coast because he wanted to visit his daughter, who was 17, and she was in a commune. And it was the spring of the year, Easter, and they'd been there all winter, her and her boyfriend, and another couple, and that was it. In the fall, there was about 30 of them. But by the time he got there was only 4 left. They'd all gone. Only had some potatoes left and cake. And the one guy had been in jail for shooting a deer, and he had the crabs, and he had to treat that guy for crabs. And then I think he bought him some groceries, and he said, she'll be home soon. And he was very nonchalant about it. And we continued on down the road, and a couple of girls were there, probably about 15. He said, pick them up. So we pulled over and picked up the girls. And as we went on down towards San Francisco, where we dropped them off, he was listening. And the first thing they said, they asked him if he had any marijuana. And he said he didn't have any. And we dropped him in San Francisco. Then we went down to his house in Palo Alto, and his wife greeted him and asked him about the daughter. She was really concerned. And he said, she'll be home soon. And she made she cooked a chicken for us, and I had dinner with them. And she worked with a Stanford theater group, and she just happened to work with Steve Vickers, who was a roommate of mine, and a guy I couldn't stand him. He was in theater design, and I asked him about her, and she said about him, he's really hard to deal with. So I wasn't the only one having trouble with him. And I left him, and I never saw him again. But he also told me that he was one of the people that laid down in front of the napalm trucks in Redwood City to prevent them to go to Vietnam. So
Wow.
A very, very colorful guy, and he's not the only one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine. We could be here all night. It sounds like each story has a multitude of stories in them, and you're wonderful at remembering them and describing them. Do you recall, were you always kind of this natural story collector even as a kid, or is this something you grew into?
I don't know. I just had a lot of stories to tell,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're, they're rather unique. And when I tell people things like I shot my cousin, they want to know what happened.
Well, yeah, with an opening like that, are you going to tell us?
Okay. Uh, Roger and I got guns when we were 16. Uh, he got a 12 gauge shotgun and I got a 16 gauge shotgun, and we got a 22 automatic rifle that we used. We used the rifle for hunting squirrels and other small game like rabbits, and we used the shotgun for hunting squirrels and rabbits and birds primarily. One day we were at our grandmother's place across from their old homestead that ran down to the river, and our cousin was there, and he was 5 years younger. We were 17 at that time, and he was 12. And he wanted to go hunting because his father was a big hunter. He really was. He ran a hunting club. So we walked across the road, and the way you hunt for birds, primarily rabbits, spread out. The three of us spread out. I was on the right. My brother, I could see him to the left, and Terry was supposed to be beyond him on the left. We're supposed to keep each other in sight. And Terry had my grandfather's 22 rifle, and we were walking along and walking along and going down to the river downhill, and all of a sudden a rough grouse, or we called him partridge, took off, and I swung my rifle, shot at it, and I missed. I pulled off another shot, and all of a sudden I heard Terry yelling down by the river, "Ow, ow, you shot me, you shot me." So we ran on down to the river to see what happened. And he pulled up the ear on his cap and showed me a red spot on his head. Said, "First the bird come and it almost hit me, and then bang, I got hit with a baseball bat in my head." And I said, "Well, it's just a little red spot. You don't even have a welt on your head, so you're okay." So we walked together along the river, and a duck took off. I pulled up and I shot the duck. It landed in the middle of the river. Of course, we didn't have a boat or anything way to get it. So we watched the duck float. Finally, we went down to a bridge, and the duck came down the middle of the river towards us. And Terry pulled up the 22 and he shot it. He said, "I shot the duck. It's my duck." And I said, "Your duck, Terry? Can't be your duck. I shot it." He said, "No, you didn't. Or I'll tell my father.
Uh,
I'll tell my father if you say you shot it, that you shot me." And I had to back down.
yeah.
A little bit later, we retrieved it at the bank on the other side. He had the duck, he carried the duck, and we got back home. And he came in the house and he showed the duck that he shot. His dad was so proud of him. And Roger and I just kept quiet.
Yeah.
So that's the story. And I didn't tell anyone else that I believe wrote it down somewhere, but I didn't tell anyone at any Zoom meeting that I've been going to.
That's a great story.